Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar, D365 F&SCM 10.0.47, What's New and What It Means for You. I'm Sebastian Anderson with the Licensing and Database Desk here at Avantiico. Joining us today is a distinguished panel of D365 experts ready to share their insights on the 1047 update and help you get ahead of what's coming. Director of Managed Services and Strategic Initiatives, Chris Barbera, will kick things off with an overview of the 2026 One Version Update Cadence and conclude by discussing the powerful Model Context Protocol. D365 Finance Consultant and Director of Business Applications Consulting, Brandon Nash, will guide us through the finance section of today's show, including multi-currency reporting, line-level cancellation control, set balance updates, and more. Next, Senior D365 Supply Chain Consultant, Michael Cavanaugh, will deliver the latest supply chain management updates and enhancements, such as block transaction handling, dynamic work classification, consolidating inventory transactions, and other topics. And finally, our indispensable project manager, Braden Short, will shine some light on the latest platform updates soon to grace your monitors, including the enhancements to Visual Studio's Find All References feature, and why Visual Studio 2022 is still, by far, the best environment for F&O developer workloads. Chris will be taking over shortly, but before we dive into today's session, I'd love to share some of the other exciting webinars and events we have in the pipeline. Let's go on to those here. Right. First, on March 19th at 10 a.m. Pacific, join us for Dynamics 365 F&SCM Licensing and Security Enforcement. 2026 is well underway, and so is Microsoft's latest D365 licensing enforcement push. The clock is ticking, and with enforcement timelines based on your organization's contract renewal or anniversary dates, staying ahead of the curve is more important than ever. Join us to learn about what's changing, how to determine your organization's unique deadlines and responsibilities, and what steps to take now to avoid disruption. If you're managing Dynamics licenses or are involved in renewal decisions, this session will help you reduce risk, control costs, and ensure uninterrupted D365 access. Then, later in April, date to be announced, we have streamlined Dynamics 365 F&SCM migrations and integrations with AMCS. You'll learn how Avantiico's AMCS tool helps simplify one of the most complex parts of any ERP journey, data migration and system integration. Our template-driven migration engine rapidly moves data from legacy systems into D365, ensuring accuracy, consistency, and repeatability across multiple entities. At the same time, a native integration framework makes directly connecting third-party systems a cinch, eliminating manual uploads and reducing reliance on custom development. The result is a faster, cleaner, and more scalable path to go live and beyond. Finally, meet us live from May 25th through 27th at Dynamics Minds 2026. Dynamics Minds is one of the leading community-driven conferences for Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Platform professionals, situated this year at the magnificent Grand Hotel Bernardin in Portorož, Slovenia. It brings together over 1,000 attendees, along with Microsoft experts, MVPs, and partners, for several days of deep technical sessions, networking, and shared learning across the entire business applications ecosystem. If you're planning to attend, the Avantiico team will be there in person and would love to connect with you. On top of that, as a gold sponsor of the event itself, we're thrilled to offer a 10% discount on your ticket purchase via the code on screen. We look forward to seeing you there. We will have more events and webinars added to the calendar, so do be on the lookout for those and be sure to let us know in the chat if there is anything you would really like to see from us in the future. All registration links for these events will be available in the chat, on our website, and within this slide deck. One last note. As we go through this presentation, do not hesitate to pop any questions you have into the chat, and we will address them in the open Q&A at the tail end of the webinar, or in direct email follow-up. And with that, Chris, take it away.
Excellent. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces or see some familiar names anyway, at least on the chat. We actually just did this at our live Dynamics Day event last week, so we are a little bit later than our normal schedule of doing these webinars. Normally, we would have done it last week before the service update came out, but so we're just a little bit behind this time. Okay, so let's take a look here. First, so what's going to happen is I'm going to go through a bit of an overview of how service updates work in general. And then we're going to go into more detail about individual changes within finance and supply chain, as well as platform updates. And then I'm going to come back at the very end to talk about some really interesting developments with the model context protocol. Okay, so let's first talk about how do we learn about what's coming out in service updates. Well, Microsoft publishes 2 wave releases a year. These are essentially, think of them as 6-month roadmaps of what's coming out from Microsoft. Now, not only for D365, but for many other applications as well. So it's a very useful tool. You can look and research this at aka.ms/release planner, and it will give you kind of an interesting review of and preview of what's coming out, both the preview date, what day it'll be released, how it will be implemented, and the business value of these features. Now, just know that these are a bit aspirational sometimes in terms of the actual dates they'll come out. So sometimes the dates will change a little bit, but generally, it will come out sometime during those 6 months. So what's announced in these wave releases is actually implemented into your system within the 4 service updates that are released for D365 each year. So in this case, we're talking about version 47, and I believe actually the published date for wave release 1, I think it's tomorrow. They're supposed to drop what's coming out, and sometimes they do it a bit early, but the last I saw it was March 18th for that. So anyway, it's a very good tool, and let's talk about next slide, please. All right, so what's included in these service updates? There are essentially new features. So think about enhancements or new features that are included in your subscription. So if you're already paying for your subscription, you might as well get the new features that are coming out. And there's a lot of them, potentially hundreds in each of these service updates. There's also platform updates. Think about things as UI changes, optimizations to the user experience and such that you may not always see on your menus, but is actually helping you out in different ways. And then there's regulatory updates. Think about things like 1099 changes. Most of these recently have been international changes. There's a lot of international localizations that may have specific invoice formats and things like that may be a factor. They also announced depreciation or removal of features, and thankfully they normally give us about a year when they're going to depreciate and remove features, but not in every case. And the good thing is mostly they're replaced with newer or enhanced features. But it is important to keep an eye out on those, especially if you have anything that may be customized around those features. And then, like every software, there are quality updates, which Microsoft uses as a fancy name for bug fixes. And there are other ways for security or bug fixes to get in between these updates called proactive quality updates. Not going to go into those today, but just know that Microsoft does have a mechanism if there is something that's very urgent to get in. So as we mentioned, there are hundreds of changes in each of these updates, and this is really why we started this webinar series. Because our team that have been at least 10 years experience with the application, anyone on this call, has gone through these different hundreds of updates and distilled it down to what we think is most important for most customers and for most people. We still encourage you to look around and look at the Microsoft information, because there may be something highly unique for your industry or something that could be valuable. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are 4 service updates a year. You can skip 1. So what it means is you can skip every other update. So 2 are required for everyone that's using D365. Now we have about 3/4 to half of our customers may take every update or 3 updates, and about 40–50% take, say, every other update. So it just depends on if you want to have fewer testing cycles that are longer, if you want to wait longer to get new features, or if you'd like to take them as soon as they come out. So it is important to also know that what happens if you just decide not to take the update and it's mandatory for you? Well, Microsoft will put it in for you, which is called an auto update. And we like to say auto updates are great for iPhone, not so great for your enterprise applications, because you have ISVs that may need to be updated, your custom code, you have new features from Microsoft, you may have interfaces. It's important to have a very standardized way. and a plan on how you're going to get that in and how you're going to test it, which environment you're going to use, making sure that your lifecycle services settings are proper, so you don't get any of these updates coming in unexpected. So know that if you are on 45 now and you skip the update that came out in December, that this version update is mandatory for you, version 47. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's look through the time frame for this specific update. Now, what we're assuming in this scenario is that 47 is mandatory for you and that you have the most optimal settings in Microsoft Lifecycle Services to give you the most time possible to get the update in. We do have slightly shorter time to get this version 47 in than we do for the previous one, 46. And Microsoft kind of gives us a break when they know when it's year end and it's beginning of the year and budgeting. They give you a bit longer, but the subsequent updates, this one and the later ones this year, will have a little bit shorter time period to get in. Okay, so Microsoft says the update was generally available on last Friday. So again, just continue to look at the bottom here in the blue section. There are 2 auto update windows. You can skip the first, but not the second. So your UAT environment at the latest possible will auto update on 5.8, and your production environment will update on 5.15, along with some of your other UAT environments. You have multiple. So what do we recommend? We actually recommend starting as early as yesterday for starting your service update. And you'll have about 6 weeks to get it in. We recommend that everybody is live at least on the weekend of 4/24 on 47 if it's a required update for you. Now you'll see about a 2-week lag here between when the production update we're recommending and when the first auto update is. Just from experience, if you go back a couple years when there was this CrowdStrike issue, it took down a bunch of systems. It did not take down D365, but most of the companies we were working with that were planning to go to production that weekend for D365 had a lot of other things going on. Other systems had gone down and they just couldn't do it. This 2-week gives you time as contingency to recover and still get it in without bumping right up against that service update, auto update. Okay, and that's why we recommend that. Okay, next slide. Okay, I won't go through this, but know if you wanted to look up the details about the update yourself, there was unfortunately about 6 or 7 places you need to look in the Microsoft literature and on their website to get this information. And this is really why we kind of try to help you with this as a primer, because it does take a fair amount of time to look through all of this. We will be providing the deck here at the end if you're interested, and then you can get these links. If you are one of our managed services customers now, you should have already received this last Thursday. It would have come from news@avantiico.com. So if you didn't get it, just let us know and we'll make sure you get a copy. All right, I think we're now ready for Brandon here with finance.
Sounds like a plan. I will move that over and let you take it away, Brandon.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Sebastian. We can go ahead and just jump right into the slides. We'll talk about the finance highlights, the key functions for this version. We'll go through a couple of different ones. We're going to start off with the multi-currency customer statement report. So this is a cool feature that has come out for 10.47 for those companies that are dealing with clients that are that they have where they utilize multiple currencies. It allows you to display the opening balances in multiple currencies when the customer transactions in those currencies predate the report date. And so what that allows you to do is it allows you to be consistent in terms of your multi-currency reporting to reduce confusion, give you better confidence in the statement accuracy, and reduces that manual correction work by allowing your team to see what the right balances are automatically without some additional configuration. And it's already kind of built into the system once you turn it on in feature management. And it works great in terms of the customer statement report. I'm not going to drain every single bullet point, but as you can see on the screenshot here that we have, there's a new field on there called single currency customer report. So I'm going to take over the screen share and give you an example of what this allows you to do and how it benefits in terms of seeing what the differences are between when you have just single currency report versus a multi-currency report and you're dealing with clients or your customers that work in multiple currencies. So let me just take the screen share here for a moment and jump into my environment. And I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. So I'm just going to go into accounts receivable. As you can see here under inquiries and reports, under customers, customer account statement. So I have some criteria already set up. I have it, we're just going to run a date interval of this current period. We're going to show open transactions. And right now I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's just a single currency report. Okay. I've got a client here or my customer that uses euros, and we'll run the report and show you what that looks like when you have a client that you deal with or a customer that you deal with in multiple currencies. So as you can see here, the customer has some opening balances coming into the period of $20,547. They had a transaction during this current period of March of 1,000 and the ending balance. But you can see the ending balance, the balances look a little wonky, for lack of a better technical term, because we're dealing with USD is our reporting currency and euro is our transaction currency for our customer, and that can just create some confusion, maybe make some newbies a little worried when they see their transaction in the report. So what this new feature allows you to do is allows you to have this single currency report set to off. So basically it's a multi-currency report now, and when I click OK, this discrepancy gets cleared up very quickly. And this is what I mean when I talk about confidence and security in this accuracy of the report. So now you can see what that opening balance really was when it comes to your client working in euros, and then the actual balance, and being able to see what that looks like when your customer is transacting in a different currency, and you have the USD, for example, as your reporting currency. Now obviously this does not really impact you if you work with USD and all of your customers work with USD. But for those that have multi-currency scenarios going on in their day-to-day operations, this is a huge win for you in terms of the multi-currency reporting on your customer account statement. Now let's go on to the next feature. I'm gonna stop sharing, and we can bring in the PowerPoint to show the next feature. Has to do with financial tags on expense reports. Now, I'm hoping and expecting that a lot of folks are familiar with financial tags right now, especially you guys that deal in the finance realms, because these financial tags are now available to us on expense reports. Financial tags have been infiltrating their way throughout all the different forms and functions in D365, and now you get to carry those tags all the way through the posting process in your expense reports. So now you have the capability of not needing to manually retag or reclassify expenses if they are not aligned with your financial dimensions. As you all may know, financial tags are a little more flexible, and as you can see here, they're available on the header as well as on the line level of the expense report. Reduces that reconciliation effort between your expense postings and other tag transactions, and there's just now more consistency throughout the system when you talk about using financial tags in a lot of different varieties of documentation throughout the financial functions in D365. So that's also a really good feature that has come out with this new version. Let's move forward now to the next feature, which is line level cancellation for general budget reservations. So budget reservations just at a high level, because not a lot of people use them. When we were at Dynamics Day last week, I asked how many of us are using general budget reservations or the budgeting module in general. And I think there were 2 hands that raised out of an audience of 40. So wouldn't be surprised if that was the same ratio here today, but nonetheless, it is a new feature, and it is a good feature for those that do work with budget reservations. Now, a budget reservation is basically a commitment for a company that wants to earmark or set aside funds for a particular process or purpose throughout the year that they're preparing for, without necessarily having that defined at the early start of the year. So you want to reserve those funds right away. The general budget reservation is then applicable to purchase orders, purchase requisitions, vendor invoices, and so on. So when you make those purchases, and what this function allows you to do is it allows you to cancel those budget reservations at the line level, which didn't exist before. You basically had to cancel your reservation as a whole and then start a whole new one. And so what this allows you to do is it allows you just a little more flexibility, allows you control over that process. When it comes to reservations that maybe contain a mix of active and no longer needed lines on your budget reservation. You also have the accounting and budget control entries that are generated automatically on the line. So now you have a full audit trail of that manual process when you have to cancel or update or finalize your budget reservation line. So this is another feature that I just want to demonstrate, or at least just highlight in the system to show you the flexibility that allows you to have. So bear with me here while I take the screen share again and move over to my screen. Let's close off this guy that's got the statement, and let's go into, let's get our connection back first. You know, when you work in these demo environments, sometimes they can be a little tricky, so always be prepared. Okay, so let's go into our budgeting. We're going to go to our general budget reservations. Now, you also have to have a lot of different things configured, posting definitions, for example, your encumbrances that are set up, and obviously you got to have budget control configuration enabled when you're working with general budget reservations. But as you can see here, I have a general budget reservation for the purchase requisition type. And in this requisition or in this reservation, I already have some funds earmarked for some laptops, and now I want to earmark some funds for some service department vehicles that I'm going to use at some point. So as you can see here, this one, this first line, I can't really do any editing with because it's already been posted, as you can see. But this particular line that I haven't done any transactions with, I'll still be able to post it once I go through that process. But in case I need to change it, this is where that line cancellation comes into effect. And it's, like I said, very flexible because of the fact that you can cancel this individual line. So you picture your business having a mixture of different funds that you want to earmark for different purchases that you're going to need throughout the year. And, you know, after you meet with your managers and your department heads and you realize that, oh, we're actually not going to need that, let's go ahead and cancel that right now without having to cancel it without having to have canceled the full journal or the full general budget reservation that you've already put together. Because let's say you have, you know, you've been working on this, you have 10 lines, and now you need to cancel the whole thing and start over. You know, you have to have saved that, maybe export, deal with data management framework. Not necessary. You just go ahead and cancel it, put your accounting date in, and move on to the next line, and you're good to go. So that happens right here. You see the funds are no longer available. Cancel, finalize, it all works out, and now you're not dealing with this line anymore. And then you can continue to move on and add lines as needed. So again, if you're using budgeting and budget control, and you know you're tightly controlling those things that get purchased, this feature is now something that's new that will benefit you in version 10.47. Okay. Next feature that we're going to show a screenshot on has to do with the trial balance and your dimension set updates. So dimension sets are obviously used when you're running your balances in your trial balance and that reporting that you have. Well, now the update balances function that normally runs on a batch job in the background is now available for you to be able to run on the spot. So your finance managers, your accounting managers that are using the trial balances regularly going in there, this is kind of a performance enhancement because now you have that budget set, dimension set balance update directly on the form. So now you have your users giving the ability to manually kick off that batch job so that it can run and you're not necessarily waiting on it when you may potentially have some discrepancies because transactions are happening in your system. So your finance team has direct control over when those dimension set balances are refreshed. You don't have to wait for that automated process, and the discrepancies that may be there, you can eliminate them because you have that balance update right at your fingertips. So this is a nice little feature that's available to you that underpins the performance the performance options that are being updated in this new version. And this adds to it, except it's at that user interface level and not just something that's happening in the background. Okay, let's keep it moving. So the next thing is transaction date for unbilled revenue recalculation. So this is a feature that is used with the subscription billing functions within D365 and having to deal with unbilled revenue when you need to make a recalculation in your system because of maybe some changes that are going to happen in your subscription billing. So let's say, for example, you have a customer that you're selling some type of warranty or service with through a subscription bill, and they want to purchase some more of your services, and you need to recalculate being able to do that. Well, this feature now introduces a particularly dedicated transaction date on the recalculation of your unbilled revenue. So that way there's a clear distinction between when the original posting occurred and when this update has happened. And so what that allows you to do is it prevents the incorrect unbilled revenue update that can occur when recalculations are triggered outside of the regular billing schedule, because you're going to normally have your subscription billing set up for 3, 4, 6 month, 1 year period. And if recalculations need to happen at a certain time, let's say a recalculation in a previous month, or a recalculation of a transaction that happened in the previous month, you now have control over that transaction date as long as that transaction date is open. So I'm going to go into D365 one more time and kind of show you where that applies.
Take it away.
Yeah, so let's go into D365 and we'll just navigate out of our budget reservation, and go over to our subscription billing module. And we'll go to our all billing schedules. And of course, you have to have something set up. You have to have your unbilled, you have to have your items or your service items set up for unbilled revenue to be applicable. So in this case, I have a subscription bill, a subscription billing plan or billing schedule for a client that is purchasing some documentation services from us. And you know, the subscription range is 4 months. We have 5 hours of that they're going to purchase every month from us at $100, and it can go under unbilled revenue. And so what I've already done is I've already used this create journal entry feature to create a journal entry at the line for this particular bill. Really quickly, let me just step aside and show you the view billing detail. So this view billing detail outlines each period of the expected payments that are going to happen, right? And because I started on the 2nd, this is slightly shorter. Okay, so let's go down here. So as you can see, I have my journal number that was already created for the amounts, but let's just say, for example, we need to be able to change this amount and say the customer says, oh, you know what, we actually want to have 7 hours going forward. So I can just put this in as a 7, and it lets me know that changing the quantity, the unit price, or the net amount will reverse the unbilled revenue journal entry. So this journal entry that I have, even if I haven't posted it, it's going to create a reversing journal entry and then create a new one for me. And what this allows me to do once I hit yes, even though it's subtle, again, another powerful feature, because the recalculation date is here. So I have my actual transaction date of when the transaction happened. But if I want this to be applicable, let's say if I was in the month of April and I wanted this to be applicable at the end of March, I can do that here. And now I have that flexibility. And I can put some comments in here, changing services, from 5 hours to 7, something like that, right? So just way you have that auditability for your transactions in your system to be able to see, and for your other users. So now I get the note that the reversing journal entry was created. And so when I go into my unbilled revenue journal entry audit, and this is one of the features that I really like, is I have my initial transaction and I have the transaction and the new amount for what it's going to be billed for. And I also have visibility into what was the original journal that I could go to, the reversing journal that is going to be created, and then the new journal that's going to be created for the amount. So I have full transparency in terms of all the transactions that are getting created by just having that simple calculated date there. So as you can see, once again, auditability, performance capabilities that allow you to have full visibility through your transaction lifecycle in a couple of different areas, from budgeting to now subscription billing. So with that being said, let me hit OK. We're going to just finish off with a few of the key features that are going to be available as well, that we're not going to highlight or show screenshots of, but I just want to show you the different, just talk through really quickly a couple of the different key features that are going to be available to you in 10.47. So talking about subscription billing, there's going to be some performance improvements for the subscription billing unbilled revenue batch process. So this is a feature that the unbilled revenue mass processing in batch is going to be a little bit better, something that's in the background that you'll be able to apply. Your account reconciliation agent, as everybody knows, agents and AI capabilities with Copilot are, starting to again infiltrate all of our systems and become a part of our daily operation. And the account reconciliation agent is going to have some improvements when it comes to that functionality in that workspace, because now you can filter by your legal entity. So again, something that's going to be a very key feature for different teams. And then you have a couple of tax and performance improvements that are going to happen. This feature, both with withholding tax and the standard tax engine performance for free text invoices. So again, if taxes are a big part of your business, these are features that you'll want to investigate and test out and apply if applicable. And then lastly, one of the last functions I want to point out is the purchase order, the non-retrievable purchase orders from your purchase order year-end process. So what this feature allows you to do, this feature allows you to recognize purchase orders that may be preventing your year-end process from closing because they're not retrievable. This feature came out, I want to say last year as a new feature, and I believe it's on by default. I think our document here says feature management, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it's actually on by default now. So this is something that, again, if you're using budgeting, you're using purchase order year-end processing, you'll need this feature, or at least this feature will be very beneficial to you and your team if you're going to be using the purchase order year-end process. So I hope this information was super helpful and valuable to you guys as far as the demonstrations as well as the screenshots. And with that, that concludes the financial presentation, and I'll pass it over to Sebastian, who will segue to Michael Kavanaugh for supply chain management.
Sounds like a plan. We'll have our resident supply expert walk us through the depot, so to speak. Take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Sebastian. Okay, so let's start looking at some of the supply chain highlights here. So as a high level here, just with 1047, there's not a lot of big flashy features that we're going to kind of be going through today, but there's a lot of little performance improvements and small features that might impact or make improvements to how you perform these processes today. So one of those is that we're going to talk about first is excluding block transactions from master planning. So right now, anytime you have an inventory status that has a blocked checkbox on its setup where it actually blocks the inventory, the way the system does that is it creates a physical reservation against that inventory if you were to go look at your inventory. So if I have 4 of an item that is currently in a blocked inventory status, the system creates a reservation to block that so I can't sell that or use it for any other purpose. When master planning looks at these, traditionally on our left screenshot, which I know it's small, a lot of little small numbers there. What master planning does is it shows it as an inventory journal. So it counts it as part of the on hand, but then it shows it as an inventory journal and says, 4 of these are going to go toward this inventory journal, but in reality, that's blocked inventory that can't be used. So there's now this feature that allows us to show this differently when you're looking at your master planning results. So the screenshot on the right is with the feature enabled, and it shows that the inventory is not part of the on hand. So there's 390 on hand on the left, 4 with an inventory journal down below. That shows the blocked inventory. On the right, it shows 386 physical inventory on hand. So it doesn't even include it. So it makes it more realistic for your planners to look at. They don't have to make the connection like, oh, where's this extra inventory? Oh, I see that it's blocked. It just doesn't show it in the first place. So that's a nice little small improvement that they've given us. You can move on to the next slide. All right, dynamic work classification. So this is an improvement that they've passed to us, kind of in the vein of the ability to kind of shrink the size of our configurations needed for location directives, work templates, other warehouse setups like that. In the past, what they've done, they've given us, for example, the warehouse group where we don't have to repeat location directives or work templates across all of our warehouses. We can now say, oh, it's for a group of warehouses. So it allows us to kind of shrink the number of records that we have to maintain within our configuration. This dynamic work classification is along the same veins of that. The intent of this, and I'll do a little demo of this of kind of how this works. The intent of this is that we create a PowerFX formula, which if anyone's familiar with PowerFX, it's used in Power Platform. I believe it's also used with collection pools as well. It's a Microsoft low-code language that you can use to provide queries and things along those lines. But what this can do is we can set up this work classification tool to reclassify work classes, work priorities, things like that, that could reduce the number of work templates and location directives that we need to maintain. So with that, let me show you a little bit about how this works. As a caveat to this, or as just a notice here, I am not a PowerFX Pro yet, but it is something that we're going to be working on here. So what I have here is a dynamic work classification rule that I've set up, a very simple one that basically says, if we look down here at the actual formula, it basically says if the account number tied to the shipment is this specific account number, well, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and patch in a different work pool called forest. If it's not that, then we're going to patch in a work pool called default. Now you can do these type of things again with your work templates right now using the filters and queries to say, well, if it's this account group or customer group or whatever, I want you to do this work pool. But these PowerFX formulas can have multiple lines that can evaluate multiple different things, and it can all be run as a single formula rather than having to maintain those multiple work templates. So in this example here, we could either create some work or we can actually use the new preview feature that allows us to kind of test our formulas. So I'm going to go ahead and use this preview feature up here, and it lets me select work in the system. So I'm going to go to the bottom here and select some previously created work. And if this was to have run against it, it would say, oh, I need to change the work pool to forest. If I select a different one that doesn't actually match this account number, preview it again, changes it to default. So you can kind of get an idea of what this will do. But again, here, this is a very simple example. We're just setting a single work pool, but this could set multiple different things. It could set priority, it could set classes, it could set work pools. One other thing to kind of note about this too is this doesn't have to necessarily be just at work creation 2 that can actually perform these changes. This one can actually run on the load update as well. There's an option behind the scenes that you could set up to say, oh, I want you to run my work classification on load update, which means if I add new lines to the load or if it changes the status, it can actually reevaluate these and change these different fields associated to the work. So that gives us some additional flexibility as well. Okay, I'll go back to the PowerPoint.
Right, we'll get this spun up here real quick. And while that is loading, just on a side note, folks, please mute your mics if you haven't already. Helps us keep the presentation nice and polished. Let's go back to where we left off.
Okay. Next one, another little small thing just to kind of point out. If you are used to working with forms like all work, all loads, a lot of these WMS related forms, you've probably seen before that there's this option that says show closed on it. And I'm sure if you're like me, you've been filtering for things or looking for a specific load and you're like, oh, okay, actually it's one of the closed ones, is ship load, or it's a work that's been closed. I gotta click on this show closed button so that it shows these older records that I can actually find. That show close button is gone in 47. It's not a feature, it's not an option, it's just gone. So those are now worked into the status filters as they probably should be. So if you want to filter for ship loads, you could just add it to your the pre-built filter on the status fields for each of those forms. So we just wanted to point that out. Go on to the next one. Warehouse management mobile app support with Microsoft Entra conditional access. So what this is first off, I should start by saying this that we're talking about here is only for Warehouse app version 4. In previous calls, we've talked about Warehouse version 4. Some of you may, if you haven't upgraded to Warehouse version 4, you may see that the system is going to automatically update you to version 4 now. That's some of our clients have been reporting that over the last couple months. That is the newest version of this. Anything previous to that is going to be deprecated in June is kind of what they've identified here, that you should update to version 4 by June. If you need additional advice on that or help with that or any questions regarding that, let us know. That's not what this one's about necessarily. I just wanted to just point that out. So that's coming up here in the next couple months that everybody should at least be upgrading to version 4. Now, if you do have a Warehouse version 4, Warehouse Management app version 4, they now have support with it to work with MFA, other types of more stringent authentication associated to it as well. So that's what this kind of talks about. So this has some additional security to the logins. It does require a username and password, just as a note there. Next one, archive, load, and work records for long-term retention. So the next two things we're going to kind of talk about is dealing with storage space in D365. And that's it's a more recent concern that we've started hearing from a lot of our customers, is that as people have been live with D365 longer, you know, D365 as a cloud-based solution has been out now for, I think, 8-9 years. Database sizes are growing as more and more records and more time passes. So Microsoft has a solution with this called long-term retention, where certain records can be archived and saved in a Dataverse, in a Microsoft managed data lake. This improvement here allows load and work records to actually be archived and saved in Dataverse. Previous to this, it was things like GL transactions, inventory transactions, sales orders, things like that. So now it's been extended to load and work records as well. Okay. And this last one kind of has to do with long-term retention as well. It's called consolidate inventory transactions. Now, as I mentioned on the previous one, inventory transactions was something that was there in long-term retention previously, but in order to get the inventory transactions into long-term retention, it requires the inventory transactions go through a process called consolidating inventory transactions. This was previously available for costing methods that did require an your FIFOs, LIFOs, things like that. But it didn't work with standard costing and moving average, since those don't require an inventory close. It's now been extended to work with standard costing and moving average. After a certain amount of time, you might want to run this consolidated inventory transaction process, which will consolidate them down and put them in a configuration that could be actually pushed out to this long-term retention. Now, as a couple caveats here, Microsoft has temporarily disabled consolidating of inventory transactions. They are working through a couple issues with it right now, but we would at least want to call that out, as it is their approach for managing this long-term data storage. So they're working on this, but at the same time they're pushing out more and more functionality associated to it. So as soon as we know more about that, of when this can actually resume again, these consolidation of these inventory transactions, we'll be sure to point it out on these future calls. And then other features. So just a couple of the things we want to point out here. As we kind of mentioned, not a whole lot of big flashy things in this release, but a lot of small improvements to performance and other processes like that. A couple of them that I might call out here, the second and third one down there have to do with unified pricing. In previous calls, we've talked about when unified pricing came out and how that kind of revolutionizes how sales pricing is done in D365. They've made some additional improvements to that, where you can actually manage rules using a base currency. Previously, if you had different currencies, you had to set up separate rules for it, so that was kind of a pain, but now you can do it with the base currency. They've improved data import and export of those pricing rules that you set up. So if you want to, if you're testing in a sandbox environment and you're moving to another environment, you can now import and export those easier. And there's some other unified pricing improvements along here as well. We can go ahead and move on to the next page. Other little things we want to call out here, there's been some other little performance improvements regarding pro number generation. There's some performance improvements regarding license plate consolidation. That's been traditionally a very slow process if you're ever actually doing that in the system where you merge two license plates together. Some improvements surrounding that. And same thing around packed container picking. It's also been kind of a slow process in the past as well. So that's if you have a container that you've packed that then needs to have work to move it to another location. That's been improved as well. And I think that's all we got there. So yeah, thank you for your time. Back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Now we'll wrap on up to one of the final sections of the show, the platform highlights with Braden. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. Thank you, Michael. So taking a look at platform highlights for 10.0.47, they kind of go along the theme of what we've seen with the finance and supply chain highlights. They're really performance-based. There isn't much that's really changed with the release for platform overall, but some quick call-outs. The first one's going to be that there have been enhancements to the development experience in Visual Studio. So if there are any developers in the call, you may recall that if you go to Visual Studio now and you try to find all references, it takes quite a while for that to load. Sometimes it may, bog down your virtual machine, may cause Visual Studio to stop responding, or it can just take a while. Well, with this release, Microsoft has made some improvements to the Dynamics 365 extension for Visual Studio. And they've done that by allowing toggling of different features, such as the model references, the module name, and they've also allowed you to start grouping references. So with this release, when you start using this functionality, you should see that it is much more performant. I have had some time to test with it, and I have seen that, my virtual machine no longer bogs down. Things are a lot quicker while working in the environment. And then next slide, if you don't mind, Sebastian. Thank you. And again, there's not much platform update related for this release, but the other note that I wanted to share is that Visual Studio 2026 is now out, but it is not yet supported for Dynamics 365. So at this point in time, everyone should hopefully be off of Visual Studio 2019 and now on Visual Studio 2022. But we're expecting 2026 compatibility probably with this next service update, 10.0.48, if not 10.0.49. So just make sure, we don't get that installed in our environments. You may see some incompatibilities. With that being said, that really is all there is in regards to the general platform highlights, but I would like to pass it back now to Chris Barbera, Director of Managed Services, as we're now going to be diving into the Model Context Protocol highlights for this release.
Sounds good.
Excellent. All right. Can everyone see my screen, or Sebastian, can you see it?
Yes, we're looking
Okay.
good on the technical side.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I think this is one of the most exciting updates or changes within D365, I think, in years. So I want to go through this with you. We still have a good amount of time here, so we should be able to have some time for questions at the end as well. So we're going to talk about the Model Context Protocol, or MCP, as a release. I'm going to make a bold statement here, but hopefully I can back it up here as we talk through this, that the Model Context Protocol will fundamentally change how we interact with D365 in the next 6 to 18 months. One of the most profound changes I think we'll see here in a long time. Okay, so before we get into that though, I want to go through exactly what is the Model Context Protocol, because this is actually a concept developed by Anthropic. It's not a Microsoft exclusive concept, but Microsoft and other organizations have adopted it as a standard as it relates to AI and interfacing with applications. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a journey here first about large language models and the evolution. So let's look at a situation where I want to book a flight to London as an example. Okay, so now let's look at a large language model like ChatGPT in its most basic sense without using, say, an agent mode or something. I think of my large language model as a smart advisor, somebody sitting next to me that perhaps has gone to London many times, has flown over there, and give me some ideas about, say, the best rated airlines, historical pricing perhaps, which airlines fly direct are going to be the most convenient or comfortable for me. But the challenge is, by itself, it cannot take actions. It can't get real-time pricing. It can't book the flight for me. It can't do real-time price comparisons, and it can't pay for the flight for me. So it's limited to kind of an advisory role. So how did that evolve? Well, now we go to something called a large language model that includes tool orchestration. And for this demonstration, this example, I'm going to call that an AI agent, okay? So now I think of it as a smart assistant. This is something that can actually do things for me. So through application programming interfaces, or APIs, it can call services like get pricing, booking services, payment systems. So it can actually achieve the goal I'm looking to do. But the challenge here is that each one of those API interactions is custom and pretty inflexible. So what happens is I may have to have 3 custom APIs, and my AI agent needs to know exactly where to call that service. It has to call it in a very specific way with very specific data and get a very specific response. It also means that it's difficult to scale, because what happens is if one of the service providers of one of those tools changes their API or what data they need to be able to execute the service, it can break not just that one part of it, but essentially my entire process can no longer be orchestrated and I can't book my flight. So while we've been able to achieve some interaction and some activities and capabilities with AI agents, it's not very scalable and it's rather fragile, and it's how it's going to work. So this is really what MCP is trying to solve. So now we have what we call MCP server that's interacting with our agent. So think about it like this. Instead of the AI agent needing to know all these very specific things about exactly what data to put in, exactly what order, and exactly how to call it, instead think of it as your AI agent having a conversation with the MCP server saying, essentially, I want to achieve these activities. What can you do for me? And how do I need to give you the information to be able to achieve my goal? So it's more of a conversation. And what we like to think of it as is a USB-C for AI agents, or a universal connector. So here's a couple of the benefits of this. Besides having that conversation, now as a service provider, if I change one of the services, like the payment process or something, it doesn't necessarily break everything that I've built through with my AI agent, because now it's querying and asking the MCP, you know, what type of data and how do I need to give you this data, instead of having to be very regimented process. So what we get here is standardized and scalable interactions. And that's really where we're at today. Okay, so this is the general process of how we've gone through kind of from the basic LLM all the way through MCP. Now I'm going to talk about this, how this is specific to D365. So in version 10.047, we have a production-ready version of the Microsoft Dynamic Model Context Protocol. And I think that the technical name might be Dynamics Model Context Protocol. The challenge of it is it was a static model context protocol last year, and now it's dynamic. So it kind of sounds like Dynamics Dynamic Model Context Protocol. So for simplicity, I'm just going to call it the Microsoft MCP. What this does, though, is it exposes hundreds of capabilities within D365 to AI agents. Nearly anything you can do on the user interface, you can now do through an AI agent, focusing through the MCP. There's a few things it can't do. It can't do system administration and security, which I think is probably a good thing at this point. But they are continuing to expand out the features that it's capable of doing. But really the idea is, if you can do it through the UI, you'd be able to do it through MCP. The other benefit, if configured properly, it also respects your own security. So it means if I was an AP clerk and asked a financial question, even using the same prompt, I would get a different response than, say, the CFO of the company with different level of security in D365, which is, of course, important as we start to expose things out to agents and such, that we make sure we do have that security protocol in place. Okay, so just talk about how this works in practical application. I'm going to walk through kind of the current state in D365, and then we'll go through kind of the future state here with MCP. So first, I have the intent or the knowledge that I need to do something. I need to order 100 widgets from an approved vendor that has at least 90% on-time delivery. So what I'll call the intent or the knowledge of what I need to do, I have that. So what would I do currently? Okay, now I would open up D365. Perhaps I'd go to a couple different forms. I may look at some vendor performance statistics. I may look at an approved vendor list. And then I'll use a couple forms to create actually the purchase order and process that. Okay, that will happen within D365. That, of course, will, as normal, we'll call the business logic and update the data layer with the information and the posted purchase order. Here's the challenge, though. In this current state, I need two things. I need both intent. I need to know what I need to do, which is, of course, order those widgets that get here on time and from somebody that's approved. But I also have to have UI knowledge. I need to know what specific forms do I go into in my ERP system, in this case, D365, to actually achieve the result of what my intent or my knowledge that I need to do is. Okay, so I really need two things, both intent and UI knowledge. So now let's look at this future state here as we go through and we look at working with MCP and AI agents. I have the same intent. I need to order these 100 widgets. They need to be here on time, and I need to be through an approved vendor. But now I'm interacting with the AI agent, excuse me. I'm having a conversation, though. Essentially, what I know in my head that I need to do, I can basically have that conversation with the AI agent and achieve this goal. Now, it may come back and ask me, well, there's 5 approved vendors. Which one do you want to use? Or you can have some information or context there as well. But from that AI agent, now we interact with the business logic through MCP and through the data layer. But here's the big difference, and why I think there's going to be such a profound change as we look at opening up the possibilities here over the next 6 to 18 months. Now I only need to have the intent, right? What do I need to do to achieve my goal, which is order those widgets? But now I've abstracted out the business logic, the UI, and what I need to be able to do. So my intent can go directly to business logic without having to know that particular user interface. So let's use it just another example here. Say you're a warehousing company and you find this perfect candidate on LinkedIn. You really want to hire them. They have this excellent knowledge of a very similar industry. They've worked in the same type of shipping methods you use, and you want to hire them. But that company, unwisely, that they work for has been using SAP for 20 years, and therefore the person you want to hire does not know D365. Well, in current state, that's awesome. You get their knowledge, but they need to come in, look at SOPs, learn the user interface. There's a ramp up time, maybe 3 or 4 months before they're fully able to use all that great knowledge they have and put it into practical application. But in the future state, the fact that they don't know the UI becomes much less relevant, much less a hindrance to getting them productive, and that great intent can be used almost immediately, or their great knowledge. So that's really what I think is going to be quite important about MCP. Again, production ready in 47, and will continue to evolve in future updates throughout the year. So if there are questions, we're happy to take those. I do want to remind everybody, if you are not our customer yet with managed services, the type of information and the type of people that you've heard from on this call are the type of people that you'd be interacting with in our managed services team. We will be doing 40 or 45 service updates this year. I think we're doing 12 47 updates simultaneously this year. So we do have a lot of knowledge around these, and we're really happy to answer questions. And if there's any opportunity to work with you to help you getting some of these service updates in, we'd be happy to do that. Okay. All right. So let's, Sebastian, so we open it up for questions.
Sounds like a plan. We do encourage you to post any questions you have in the chat, but as of right now, we do have one from Dean Peters regarding the archiving load and work records back on the supply chain side. Is there any additional cost to those beyond the storage that it typically takes up in your D365 environment, or is that a functionality that works right away?
Well, so the long-term retention does need to be set up first. So it's a Microsoft managed data lake. So I think there's some storage costs associated to that, but the idea is you're removing the information out of your live environment and pushing it into the Microsoft managed data lake, which most guidance I've seen basically says anything you push into archiving is about 50% of the size and storage costs associated to the live active information. Now, you would push it there if you need to maintain that after a certain amount of time. But if you don't, then it doesn't necessarily need to go into long-term retention. So kind of depends on your policies and what you need there. One awkward thing I will point out, at least with the load work information, right now, there's not really a cleanup job in D365. It's one of the things we're watching for. So we can push it to archiving right now, but there's not really a job to actually delete those records that I've seen yet. So they've been pushing out more and more cleanup jobs. There's things to clean up like batch tables, wave processing within the warehouse area, but I haven't seen one for load. So I assume something like that is coming as well. That kind of goes along with it. So if you were to push that, at least from what I'm seeing right now, you'd kind of be duplicating it. So I think there needs to be a little bit more added to the solution before you can truly save on that data.
Copy that. And a follow-up to that, how do you access that archived information in terms of reporting, using it for that topic?
So it's in Dataverse. So there's a Power App to access that. There's a long-term retention Power App. I will also mention data that does go into archiving can be restored back if it absolutely has to be as well. I haven't experimented with that yet, but it is one of the things that they state is there as well, but it's all through a Power App.
Copy that. And a similar question regarding how archiving that data affects reports, particularly with a Power BI slant or context. Is there any additional things to worry about?
That one, I would assume as long as you point to that Dataverse environment, you can still report on it. So it'd have to be from multiple sources now. I wouldn't necessarily be the best person to advise on that. We do have a data practice here at Avantiico, where we have experts that can really assist with that. But I would assume as long as you're pointing to both sources, that or actually maybe a situation where you push data into the same Dataverse environment, live and archive data, and then you could report it from one source. But I think that'd be more of a question for them.
Sounds good. That does bring us to the end of the questions we currently have. However, it's probably good to leave a few seconds here if folks have anything else they would like to ask. And it goes without saying, but if you have any questions beyond the show today, please feel free to email us. We're just one message away, and we're always happy to get into the details with you.
Sebastian, if I could just jump in one question here, just maybe to the audience, and we really enjoy doing these webinars, and we've getting larger and larger audiences each time. But it'd be great to get anybody's feedback on if there are things you would like us to talk about more. If you see something where, hey, there's an area that I've really found interest in over, say, our past couple webinars or in this one, or areas where I'd really like to learn more information, but I just haven't seen it out there, on YouTube or any, a current partner, or if there's anything that we can help out with, we really great to hear about topics, because I think we want to make sure we're putting out relevant information to everybody, and we really appreciate you guys' feedback. It means a lot to us.
Awesome. Yeah, we do definitely agree. There is, speaking of new and relevant information, another question from Dean about MCP and whether or not it recognizes legal entity specific security access. How does that work on the MCP side?
Dean, we could get an exact answer for you, but my understanding is yes on that, because it essentially is logging in as you, so it's having your capabilities. There are other ways, and I think Brandon, you talked about this in more detail. Unfortunately, we had more time at Dynamics Day, and Brandon actually showed some of the MCP working live, which was awesome. But yeah, if it's set up correctly, then it essentially has the same access you do, so it would have the same kind of legal entity access.
Excellent. And just as a general note, yes, we will be making the slide deck available to anyone who wants it for personal reference or to show to their teams, perhaps for a pitch or an overview of what we can do.
And I see Aaron puts something in here. I'll just plug this real quick since we've got a minute. If anybody is interested in a free road mapping session where we'll go through and help you plan out the service updates for the rest of the year in terms of when your busy seasons are, which ones you can skip, which ones you can't, make sure your LCS settings are set up properly, do a quick check on your pause status. We do offer that as a roadmap service. It is no charge, no obligation. Usually takes about maybe a 30-minute call to just kind of get the information. Then we'll go back, put together the roadmap for you, and then just have a brief discussion with you to explain it. Again, it's a pretty quick process, but it is very helpful, and it also helps your team kind of know when you're going to be testing and when you're going to be taking service updates throughout the entire year. So if you are interested, you can just reach out here on the chat as well. Yeah, any other questions?
So far, it's a clean slate. I will, again, allow for a few more seconds, but I think in general, we're coming up close to our time here. So, yeah. Drum roll. Any more? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Sold to the Avantiico support and managed services team. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been an excellent show, and it's been lovely to have you all here. Friendly faces, new faces, and old ones as well. And please feel free to email us if you have any other questions. And we look forward to seeing you at the next show we put on, or the next live event you might meet us at. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sebastian.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.